Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Now we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 25th of December 2018, and the news that would be covered today is given on the screen, and the timestamp for the same is given in the description and the comment section given below. And so now with this, let us start with the first article. Now we have taken the lead editorial from the editorial page on page 8. Now what this article provides is a criticism of the recently given notification by the Ministry of Home Affairs, whereby it has authorized 10 central agencies to intercept, monitor and decrypt online communications. And therefore the first aspect that we're going to be understanding from this article is a critique of the surveillance system of India. Now the second aspect that this article provides is a debate between the surveillance of an individual and the right to privacy of an individual. Now the final aspect that this article provides are various recommendations which have been given by the author on how the surveillance framework of India can be changed. Now apart from this, as a recommendation, I would ask you to also read this article because it has been very well written, whereby this article gives you a comprehensive understanding of the critique of the surveillance system and of surveillance versus privacy. Now you should see this article and the upcoming explanation from three various perspectives of your UPSC mains examination. First, from the perspective of GS paper 2 within the section governance. Secondly, from the perspective of GS paper 3 within the section security. And lastly, from the perspective of GS paper 4 within the section ethical governance. So now let us start with the analysis of this editorial. Now according to the author, there are two main acts which provide the surveillance framework in India. The first is the 1885 Telegraph Act, while the second is the IT Act of 2000. Wherein surveillance of telephone is provided under the 1885 Telegraph Act, while the surveillance of computer resources is authorized under the IT Act of 2000, apart from the IT rules that have been given in 2009. And what has happened now is that the Ministry of Home Affairs has recently authorized 10 central agencies, such as the CBI, the Commissioner of Delhi Police, the Central Board of Direct Taxes, for interception, monitoring, and decryption of any information through any computer resources. However, what has happened is that this notification has been severely criticized since it is considered to be an incremental or a step towards the surveillance state within India. Now, when we say a surveillance state, it basically means a country in which the government collects information on its citizens which is beyond necessary as to what is required to maintain the security of the country. So let's say if there is one person A and he has information from 1 to 10. Now to maintain security, a particular country only needs information 1 and 2 of this particular person. However, what would happen in a surveillance state is that the government would undertake surveillance on all aspects from 1 to 10. And therefore, when a government ends up collecting information on its citizens which is beyond necessary to maintain the security of the country, that country would be considered as a surveillance state. And it is within that regard that the author has said that this recent notification by the Ministry of Home Affairs is one step towards making India a surveillance state. Now you have to understand that this is a very simplified example. Now it is within this context that the author has provided three criticisms of the surveillance system of India. Now the first criticism that has been provided by the author is that the surveillance system of India is highly bureaucratized, whereby both the decision and the review process of those decisions are undertaken by the executive branch. Now the author has highlighted that the request to put someone under surveillance is undertaken by the 10 central government agencies. The approval to put someone under surveillance is given by the Union Home Secretary, while the review process of the decisions undertaken by the Home Secretary to put someone under surveillance is undertaken by the Cabinet Secretary. And it is within this context that the author has said that the surveillance system of India is highly bureaucratized and is only controlled by the executive branch of the country, whereby the Parliament of India or the Judiciary of India has no supervision on who is being put under surveillance and under what process the surveillance is being undertaken. Now, apart from this, the author has also highlighted that the individual who has been put under surveillance will almost never know that they have been under surveillance. Now, the second criticism which has been given by the author is that Section 69 of the IT Act, which provides the ground for surveillance of a particular person, is vague and ambiguous in nature. Now this Section 69 of the IT Act is based on Article 19, Clause 2 of the Constitution of India. Now Article 19 of the Constitution of India deals with right to freedom, whereby all citizens shall have the right to freedom of speech and expression, apart from other fundamental rights to freedom. However, under Clause 2 of Article 19 of the Constitution of India, says that the Government of India can make any law or provide any form of reasonable restrictions to the right to freedom in the interest of the sovereignty and integrity of India, the security of India, friendly relations with foreign states, apart from other forms of reasonable restrictions. While under Section 69 of the Information and Technology Act of 2000, the interception, monitoring, decryption of any information through any computer resources can be undertaken if it is necessary to do in the interest of sovereignty or integrity of India, the defense of India, or the security of India, apart from various other reasons. And it is within this context that the author has said that the various provisions given under Section 69 of the Information and Technology Act of 2000, under which a person can be put under surveillance, such as the sovereignty or integrity of India, defense of India, are similar to the reasonable restrictions that have been provided under Article 19 of the Constitution of India. However, the author has criticized this point because these reasons are vague and ambiguous in nature, whereby any person can be put under surveillance, and the reasons that have been provided under Section 69 of the IT Act can be applied to any particular person without having much scrutiny. And it is within this context that the author has criticized that this ambiguous and vague nature of reasons under which a person can be put under surveillance can lead India to become a surveillance state, whereby any information of a particular person can be taken by the state based on such vague and ambiguous reasons. Now, the third and the final reason given by the author as a form of criticism of the surveillance system of India is that India's surveillance regime is opaque in nature, whereby according to the author there is almost no information available about on which basis surveillance is undertaken, how decisions on surveillance are undertaken, and what form of legal standards are being applied when first putting someone under surveillance, and secondly, as to what surveillance methods are being undertaken. Now, these are the three main reasons for criticism which has been given by the author for India's surveillance system. Now, let us understand as to what are the arguments that have been given by the author with regards to the debate on surveillance versus privacy. Now, we'll first understand the points that have been given by the author in favor of surveillance. Now, the right to privacy is not an absolute right, whereby there are several reasonable restrictions which are provided on the right to privacy. Now, the author has said that surveillance is an essential feature to ensure the national security of India. And apart from this, surveillance also has to be undertaken outside the public eye. And therefore, according to the author, the government is justified to strike a balance between the competing values of privacy and security, whereby to maintain the national security of India, reasonable restrictions on privacy is required. However, according to the author, even though that surveillance is required for the national security of India, the standards and parameters on how, when, and what kind of surveillance needs to be properly defined, wherein the author has said that by having minimum accountability for surveillance system in India, it neither provides security to its citizens, but rather has significant violations in right to privacy of its citizens. Apart from that, the author has also quoted the right to privacy judgment of the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court has provided the proportionality standard under the right to privacy or the Puttaswamy judgment of the Supreme Court, wherein the Supreme Court under the proportionality standard has said that the government's action must be the least restrictive method by which the state goal is to be realized. So, according to the author, if the goal of the Government of India is to protect national security, then this goal should be achieved by a small infringement upon the fundamental rights of the citizens. Now, by quoting the proportionality standard under the right to privacy judgment, what the author is trying to mean is that, let's say, if only information 1 and 2 is required of a particular person, then only this much information should be undertaken when that person is under surveillance. And apart from that, only constitutional methods should be undertaken as being methods of surveillance. Wherein, let's say, emails of a particular person are under surveillance by the government authorities. Now, this person would be exchanging emails with other people. And what the author is trying to say is that the right to privacy of other individuals who are in contact with the person under surveillance should have their right to privacy protected by the government authorities, whereby under the purview of surveillance of one particular person, the right to privacy of other individuals should not be violated. And it is within that context that the author has said that methods of the surveillance system of India need to involve minimal infringement. So now hopefully you've also understood the various points that have been given by the author with regards to the surveillance versus privacy debate. Now let us understand the various recommendations which has been given by the author on how to improve the surveillance system of India. Now the author has given 5 recommendations on how to improve the surveillance system of India. Now you have to understand that these recommendations have been given by the author, and you and me as individuals can also agree and disagree with the recommendations which have been given by the author to improve the surveillance system of India. Whereby the first recommendation which has been given by the author is that the current surveillance regime of India or the current surveillance system of India cannot have the executive branch, can both be the decision making body and the body that reviews those decisions. Whereby as you already understand that the approval to put someone under surveillance is undertaken by the Union Home Secretary, while the review of this decision of the Home Secretary is undertaken by the Cabinet Secretary. So therefore you have the executive branch sitting in judgment over a decision which has also been undertaken by the executive branch itself. And it is within that context that the author is recommended that there must be some form of parliamentary oversight over the agencies that are conducting surveillance. The second recommendation given by the author is that all surveillance requests must necessarily go before a judicial authority, whereby this judicial authority can take an overview of the request in light of the proportionality standard given under the right to privacy judgment. However, you also need to understand that the current judicial system of India is already overloaded with several cases. And apart from that, how would the surveillance requests which have been given to the Union Home Secretary for approval be different from the request which would be provided to a judge as part of the judicial authority? And apart from that, the proportionality standards can also be undertaken by the Union Home Secretary or the Cabinet Secretary while they're undertaking decisions on surveillance. The third recommendation provided by the author is that every surveillance request should have a mandatory reason as to why a particular person is under suspicion and therefore a target of surveillance. Now what the author is recommending is that if a person A is being put under surveillance, then the request which is being made to put this person under surveillance should have the actual and specific reason as to why this particular person is a target of suspicion. The fourth recommendation provided by the author is that evidence which has been obtained through unconstitutional surveillance must not be allowed to be presented before the court. However, you also have to understand that currently there are no specification as to which method of surveillance is constitutional or not. And apart from that, if the surveillance methods are under scrutiny of the courts, then the surveillance method of India's intelligence agencies would come under the public eye and thereby compromise the national security of India. And the fifth and the final recommendation which has been given by the author. Now the author has said that there should be a process of a devil's advocate would give arguments on behalf of the proposed target. Now as you already understand that the author has recommended that a judicial authority must take the overview of every surveillance request. And what the author is trying to recommend here is that various central agency would be giving the reason as to why a particular person should be put under surveillance, and therefore a devil's advocate or a person who would act as an advocate on behalf of the proposed target would provide reasons as to why this person should not be put under surveillance and scrutinize the reasons which have been given by the central agencies as to whether there is probable cause for suspicion against this particular person or not. And this person who would act as the devil's advocate would do so without the knowledge of the proposed target. So now these are the 5 main recommendations which have been given by the author to improve the surveillance system of India. However, it is not required for you to agree with all the 5 recommendations of the author. So now hopefully you've understood the 3 main aspects which have been given by the author. First, with regards to the critique of the India surveillance system. The second aspect being the debate between surveillance versus privacy. And the third and the final aspect of author's recommendation to improve India's surveillance framework. Now a related question has already been asked in GS paper 2 of 2013 mains examination, which had asked discuss section 66A of the IT Act with reference to its alleged violation of Article 19 of the Constitution of India. Now based on this, a mains question for your practice is discuss section 69 of the IT Act with reference to its alleged violation of right to privacy of citizens of India, whereby you would be able to answer this question with the help of this article and the explanation given in this section. especially with the help of the aspects number 1 and 2. Now apart from this, if you take a look at the essay paper of the UPSC examination, you're provided various topics which are given in form of a line, such as poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere, whereby several of the topics which are provided in the essay examination are generally based on an ethical principle, such as if you take a look at question number 7, a people that values its privileges above its principles loses both. And it is within that context that a statement is provided for your practice for essay examination, where it states that those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Now, this is a famous statement which has been given by Benjamin Franklin, whereby you can try to answer this topic by highlighting on how Section 69 of the IT Act provides for the citizens of India to give up their essential liberty so as to maintain national security. And what you can do is use this editorial and the explanation given in this section to write an essay from 1000 to 1200 words based on this famous statement given by Benjamin Franklin, whereby in previous essay examination, various statements that have been given by famous philosophers such as Mahatma Gandhi have also been asked as topics within the essay examination. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this opinion-based editorial from the editorial page on page 8. Now what has happened is that recently the Niti Aayog has proposed for the formation of All India Judicial Services, whereby the Niti Aayog has proposed that there should be a centralized judicial recruitment process for the lower judiciary. But what this article is providing is a critique to the proposal of the Niti Aayog. So the first thing that we're going to understand from this article is the current recruitment process of the lower judiciary. And the second aspect that we're going to understand is what has been the critique that have been given by the author with regards to centralized recruitment for the lower judiciary. Now with regards to your UPSC syllabus, you should see this article and the upcoming explanation from the perspective of GS paper 2 within the section Constitution and Polity. First with regards to separation of power, second with regards to structure, organization and functioning of the judiciary, and lastly from the aspect of functions and responsibilities of the unions and the state, and the issues that may arise in the federal structure. Now what had happened recently is that the Niti Aayog released a paper called the Strategy for New India at 75, wherein under this new strategy, the Niti Aayog has recommended for the creation of an All India Judicial Services, whereby this All India Judicial Services will make appointments to the lower judiciary. And these appointments to the lower judiciary should be made through the All India Judicial Services examination, which would be conducted by UPSC. Now you have to understand that there are several All India services such as IAS, IPS among other. And individuals are recruited for IAS, IPS and for other All India services through an All India examination, whereby IAS and IPS, as you already know, are recruited through the Civil Services examination, which is conducted by UPSC. And it is in similar terms that the Niti Aayog has recommended that appointment of judges to the lower judiciary should be made through an All India Judicial Services examination conducted by UPSC. However, the authors in their article have argued against a centralized judicial recruitment for the lower judiciary. Now, an important aspect that you should remember, especially with regards to your upcoming prelims examination of 2019, is what is the current procedure of recruitment of lower judiciary, whereby under Article 223 and Article 234 of the Constitution of India, all powers of recruitment and appointment to the lower judiciary are vested with the State Public Service Commission and the High Courts. However, through the 42nd Amendment of 1976, Article 312 was added to the Constitution of India. And this Article 312 allowed the Rajya Sabha to pass a resolution by two-thirds majority, which would allow the Parliament to create an All India Services, including the All India Judicial Services. And so for a centralized recruitment through All India Judicial Services, the Parliament would need to amend Article 233 and Article 234, which will remove the power of the states for appointment of lower judiciary and then give the power of appointment of judges of the lower judiciary to the central government. However, the current procedure is that under Article 233 and 234, the recruitment and appointment to lower judiciary are vested with the State Public Service Commission and High Courts. And only if both of these articles are amended by the Parliament of India can an All India Judicial Services can be created. Now let us understand the various reasons given by the author against centralized recruitment for the lower judiciary. Now, one of the arguments that has been made by Niti Aayog is that there has not been regular and uniform recruitment of judges in the lower judiciary through the State Public Service Commission. And it is within that context that the Niti Aayog has said that there should be a centralized recruitment for the lower judiciary. However, the authors have made an argument that several states such as Maharashtra and West Bengal have ensured that regular and uniform recruitment of judges to the lower judiciary is conducted, wherein several states do have regular and uniform recruitment. The authors have also recognized that several states such as Uttar Pradesh also have high vacancies, whereby uniform and regular recruitment to lower judiciary is not uniform across states. However, the authors have made an argument that the best solution to this problem lies in making the non-performing states perform better, and the creation of a centralized recruitment services is not a solution in having regular and uniform recruitment. The second reasons given by the author is with regards to efficiency of recruitment. Now, the authors have shown that the central services recruitment such as for IAS and Indian Army officers also have considerable vacancies, and therefore the authors have made an argument that there is no strong reason that centralized recruitment would be more efficient than state-based recruitment, whereby central services themselves also have considerable vacancies, and therefore they have not shown themselves to be more efficient than the state recruitment services. The third point made by the author is of representation, wherein an argument by Niti Aayog has been made that several states are not providing proper reservation while recruiting for lower judiciary, and therefore a centralized services is required so as to ensure that there is proper reservation and representation when appointing judges to the lower judiciary. However, the authors have shown that several states already provide representation in lower judicial services, whereby several states provide caste-based reservation, apart from providing special reservation to women. And as a special case, the authors have also highlighted the example of Karnataka, whereby Karnataka also recognizes two additional categories of reservation, first being economic status and the second being language-based, whereby speakers of the Kannada language are provided special reservation for recruitment for lower judiciary. And therefore the authors have highlighted that this example of Karnataka can be replicated by other states so as to ensure that there is proper reservation and effective representation of judges in the lower judiciary based on caste, gender, language, and economic status. And the fourth and the last argument which the authors have highlighted is that a recent Supreme Court judgment has held that scheduled castes and scheduled tribes can avail the benefit of reservations in only and not in states where they have migrated. And this same principle is to be followed for OBC reservations. And it is within that regard that the authors have made an argument that centralized recruitment would mean that nationally dominated scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and OBC groups would be at a better advantage to clear the exam and get appointed. And it is within that regards that the authors have said that diverse representation among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the lower judiciary would be better served through recruitment by state, whereby what is currently happening is that the scheduled tribes from states such as Rajasthan and others perform better in All India examinations, while scheduled tribes from states such as Chhattisgarh and the Northeast have not been able to effectively take advantage of the reservation for scheduled tribes. However, the scheduled tribes which live in Chhattisgarh and the northeastern states would have a better chance of being appointed to the lower judiciary through their state examination. But if an all India judicial examination is being conducted, then the nationally dominant scheduled tribes, such as from the state of Rajasthan and others, would be at a better advantage to clear the all India judicial examination than the scheduled tribes of Chhattisgarh and the northeast. And it is within that context that the authors have said that the diverse representation among scheduled caste and scheduled tribe in the lower judiciary would be better served through state recruitment. So now hopefully you've understood the four reasons given by the authors as criticism for centralized recruitment for the lower judiciary. Now question for your practice is consider the following statements. And what you need to do is pause this video, solve this question and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to this question is C, both 1 and 2. Now the first statement of this question has been asked in the prelims examination of 2012, whereby as you already understand that Rajya Sabha is conferred the power to pass a resolution which would empower the parliament to create one or more all India services. And therefore, for the government to form the All India Judicial Services, first the Rajya Sabha has to pass a resolution to empower the Parliament to create the All India Judicial Services. And it is after that that the Parliament would amend Article 233 and Article 234 so as to shift the power of recruitment to the lower judiciary from the state to the centre. Now, statement number 2 has been asked in the prelims examination of 2004, whereby as per the current procedure, the district judge are appointed by the governor in consultation with the High Court. And so therefore both 1 and 2 statement are correct. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this opinion-based editorial from page 9. Now what this article talks about is that as per the Election Commission, if a situation arises where the number of NOTA votes exceeds the number of votes which has been polled by any of the candidates, then the candidate with the highest number of votes would still be declared as winner. So let's say if there are 3 people which have stood for elections, whereby first person gets 100 votes, while the second person gets 200 votes, while the third person gets 170, while NOTA gets 300 votes. Now, even though NOTA or none of the above option has gotten the maximum number of votes, it would still be candidate number 2 who would be declared as a winner in an Indian election. And it is within that context that the author has made an argument that votes which are casted for NOTA currently do not have any form of electoral significance. And therefore what the author is recommending is that the option NOTA should have some form of electoral significance, whereby if NOTA has some form of electoral significance, it would compel the political parties to nominate a deserving candidate. Whereby if NOTA has received the maximum number of votes, then the majority of the population within that area do not want either of the 3 candidates. And it is within that context that the author wants NOTA to have some form of electoral significance so that it would put pressure on political parties to nominate a more deserving candidate. And it is within that context that the author has highlighted the recent decision of the state election commissions of Maharashtra and Haryana, whereby they have taken decisions to enhance the electoral significance of NOTA. Now recently local bodies elections were held in Haryana, and in these local body elections, a decision was taken by the Haryana State Election Commission, whereby NOTA was declared as a fictional electoral candidate. And if in any election of the local bodies, all the contesting candidate individually received lesser vote than NOTA, then none of the contesting candidates will be declared as elected. So if in the local body elections in Haryana, if NOTA had received 300 votes and candidate number 1, 2 and 3 had received less than 300 votes, then none of the candidates, including candidate number 2, would be declared as winner. And what would happen is that re-election would be held for that seat. And all the earlier contesting candidate who had secured less votes than NOTA shall also not be eligible to refile their nomination. So if for this seat NOTA had received the maximum number of votes, then candidate number 1, 2 and 3 would not be allowed to refile their nomination for the re-election for this seat. However, if in the re-election, if NOTA again gets the highest number of votes, then further re-elections will not be conducted and the contesting candidate with the highest vote shall be declared as elected. So if in a re-election, if candidate A, B and C receive 100, 150 and 200 votes, and even in the re-election, if NOTA still gets 300 votes and thereby has maximum number of votes, it would be candidate number C who would be declared as the winner in the re-election. However, the main aspect that you need to remember from this news, especially from the perspective of your upcoming prelims examination of 2019, is that NOTA was treated as a fictional electoral candidate in the Haryana state elections. Now you should see this article and the explanation given in this section from the perspective of GS paper 2 within the section Governance and Polity. Now based on this, a question for your practice is consider the following statements about none of the above option. And what you need to do is pause this video, solve this question and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to this question is D, 1, 2 and 3, wherein the question is asked as to which of the above statement is incorrect. Whereby with regards to statement number 1, NOTA is not an option which is provided in the election of Rajya Sabha members. Now with regards to statement number 2, India currently does not have an option for right to recall. And with regards to statement number 3, NOTA is being treated as a fictional electoral candidate in the state of Haryana. And therefore, statement 1, 2 and 3 are all incorrect. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 1 And this article further continues on page 10. Now, what has happened is that the Government of India has brought out a draft Information Technology Rules of 2018, whereby this is a proposed amendment to the Information Technology Act of 2000. And under this draft guidelines of 2018, the government seeks to make it mandatory for platforms such as WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter to trace the originator of unlawful information. And apart from that, such platforms also have to remove such content within 24 hours after being notified by the Government of India. Now, this is one of the measures that is being undertaken to tackle fake news. Now, you have to understand that this news is currently in transition, where we will have to wait and see on how the Government of India moves forward with regards to the Information Technology Guidelines of 2018. Now, taking cue from this article, what we'll try to understand is how to tackle fake news. And we'll understand it from the perspective of your GS Paper 3 within the section Security. First, within the subsection Challenges to Internal Security through Communication Networks, Role of Media and Social Networking Sites in Internal Security Challenges, and Basics of Cyber Security. Wherein previously a question has been asked in GS Paper 3 of 2016, which had asked that use of internet and social media by non-state actors for subversive activities is a major security concern. How have these been misused in the recent past? Suggest effective guidelines to curb the above threat. And similarly, a question was asked in GS Paper 3 of 2017, which had asked that mob violence is emerging as a serious law and order problem in India. By giving suitable example, analyze the causes and consequences of such violence, wherein one of the main causes of mob violence in India is the emergence of fake news. And it is within that context that we're going to understand various measures on how to tackle fake news. Now, India currently has close to half a billion internet users, wherein this makes India the second largest online population in the world after China. Now, what has happened? There has been increasing instances of misleading and false online content, and this false online content is being used to incite communal riots, spread false information, and create animosity among various groups in India. Now, there's no specific definition of fake news, and fake news generally exists within the larger context of mis and disinformation, wherein misinformation is false or inaccurate information that has been mistakenly created, while disinformation is false information that is deliberately created to influence public opinion or to spread false information. Now, hopefully, you have understood as to what is simply meant by fake news. Now, the first method that can be used to curb fake news is the usage of artificial intelligence, wherein previously, as you might be aware of also, that social media giants such as Google have experimented with artificial intelligence, wherein artificial intelligence has been used to curb spam emails, which you also might be aware of, wherein artificial intelligence can now be used to run a content cross check to see whether a news story has been replicated by various newspaper databases. And this can be used to distinguish as to what is fake news and what is actual news. The second aspect is that artificial intelligence can be used to form a database which would have the specific accounts, the sources, the geographical location, and the IP addresses, which are known sources of fake news. Wherein an artificial intelligence detection mechanism can be formed that can highlight a news or a particular comment has been shared by the specific source. Apart from this, artificial intelligence can also be used for fact checking, wherein it could look through similar articles that have appeared on a particular context, wherein artificial intelligence can spot manipulated or doctored images and videos, and thereby alerting the platform or the user of the wrongful use of the images and the videos. The second main step to stopping fake news is of user vigilance, wherein alertness is required on part of the users as actual consumers and targets of the fake information, wherein human judgment and wisdom is critical to solving the spread of fake news. So before you and I share content online, we can exercise our judgment to question the source of that information and whether it is credible or not. Third step that can be taken to curb fake news is of fact checking. Now, various fact checking websites such as Alt News have come up in India, wherein the fact checking organization Boom Live is now available on WhatsApp so as to provide factual accuracy to viral information. Now, the fourth and the final step that can be taken to curb fake news is of crowdsourcing. Now, this crowdsourcing would be similar to the concept of Wikipedia, where a network of volunteers keep the information updated. And so, human networks can be formed to combat fake news, wherein a collective effort of individuals, governments, social media, content platforms, with the additional use of artificial intelligence technology, can be used to combat the influence and the spread of fake news. So now hopefully you've understood as to what is fake news and what are the measures that can be undertaken to curb fake news. Now, main question for your practice is fake news is emerging as the main cause of concern in maintaining law and order in India. Suggest measures to tackle and curb the menace of fake news. Where you can try to answer this question with the help of this explanation. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have already discussed some of the articles in depth that have been taken in daily news headlines. And now what we'll do is understand some of the articles in brief from the perspective of your UPSC prelims and mains examination. So starting from page 1, we have already discussed in depth the news with regards to fake news. And thereby moving onwards, the news that we need to see in brief is from page 4, with regards to the article on the State Startup Ranking Report of 2018. Now you need to know about this report from the perspective of your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. Now as we have discussed before, there are three main aspects that you need to understand about any index that appears in the paper. First is who released that particular index, wherein the State Startup Ranking Report of 2018 has been released by the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, which is under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The second aspect that you need to understand is what are the objectives of that particular index, wherein the first objective of this ranking is to make sure that states and UTs are promoting startup ecosystem. The second objective is to foster competitiveness and propel states and union territories to work proactively in promoting the startup ecosystem. And the last main objective is to facilitate states and union territories to identify, learn, and replicate the good practices with regards to the promotion of the startup ecosystem. And the third and the final aspect that you need to understand about any index is what are its parameters. Now there are three parameters of the State Startup Ranking Report of 2018. First is startup policy and implementation, second is incubation support, third is seed funding support, fourth is angel and venture funding, fifth is simplified regulations, sixth is easing public procurement, and the seventh and the last one is awareness and outreach, wherein these are the seven main parameters on which the various states have been ranked upon. So now moving onward, the next news that we will be understanding is from page 5. Now the next news that we would be looking at is that 118 cell towers have to come up in an agency area, which is located in Visakhapatnam. Now what is happening is that the government is forming 118 cell towers within the agency area of Visakhapatnam, and this is being opposed by the CPI Maoist, whereby what the government has argued is that these cell towers would enable the tribal people to access information on climate, agriculture, health, and education. But the Maoists have been opposing these cell towers and have destroyed several of them in the last year. Now this is a pretty small news, and you should see this news from the perspective of JS Paper 3 within the section Security and within the subsection Linkages between Development and Spread of Extremism, wherein the formation of these cell towers are a part of the development projects that the Government of India is undertaking, so as to control the spread of extremism which has been undertaken by the Maoist. And so now moving onward. Now from the editorial page on page 8, we have discussed in depth the lead editorial on surveillance, while the editorial next to it, course correction, which has also been taken in daily news headlines, is regards to the recent decisions which has been taken by the GST Council on reduction on taxes on some products. Now this editorial is simple to understand and therefore does not require further analysis in Daily News Simplified. And so thereby moving onward. Now we have also discussed in depth the recent proposal of Niti Aayog for a centralized judicial recruitment process for the lower judiciary. And so thereby moving onward. Now from the opinion editorial page on page 9, we have also discussed in depth the editorial with regards to NOTA. Now from page 12, one of the news that has been taken is with regards to the US withdrawal from Syria. Now we have already discussed this in the Daily News Simplified of 24th of December. And what you can do is refer to that video to understand about the US withdrawal from Syria. Now apart from this, you also have to understand that this US withdrawal from Syria currently does not affect the national interest of India. But nevertheless, you could refer to the DNS video of 24th of December to get a better understanding. Now from page 13, the last news that we will be analyzing is with regards to the government proposal for an incentive package for labor-intensive sectors such as the leather sector. Now, one of the reasons as to why is government taking an incentive package only for labor-intensive sector is so as to create jobs. But you also have to understand that this news is also in transition. And therefore, let us wait and see on how the Commerce Ministry comes forward with an intensive package for labor-intensive sectors such as the leather sector. And so now with this, we have analyzed most of the articles which have been taken in daily news headlines or DNH. And now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.